Welcome in, everybody, to the Your Celtics Source podcast on this Wednesday evening, Game 1 of the NBA Finals, and the New York Knicks go into San Antonio and put on a masterclass of a defensive performance. Karl-Anthony Towns was the MVP of the game. Jalen Brunson didn't have a great game until the fourth quarter, where he showed up and delivered as he always does in crunch time. And the New York Knicks come out with a shocking victory to go up 1-0 in the series after they were off 10 days. I thought the Knicks were going to come out rusty. I thought the Knicks were going to come out, unable to make shots, all over the place. Sort of running around trying to scramble around and get to their defensive coverages. I thought the cross matches were going to be miserable for the New York Knicks in Game 1. Not for the entire series, but in Game 1 specifically. Because I was thinking that we saw what the Knicks did in that Game 1 against Cleveland, where they looked rusty for 95% of the game. Well, I guess, 75 to 80% of the game before that collapse from Cleveland in the fourth quarter. That's what I thought was going to happen. But, listen, the Knicks didn't make shots. But neither did San Antonio. San Antonio was horrific in this game as well. And so what does it lead to? It leads to an even game in terms of the shot efficiency and the shot quality. We'll get to the Spurs side in just a second. I want to start with the Knicks. We'll sort of look to the Spurs in the second half of the show. But neither team could make shots. But the Knicks locked in defensively. Specifically, Karl-Anthony Towns out on the perimeter guarding Victor Wembanyama. Listen, Wemby's not going to guard Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll get to what Karl-Anthony Towns did on the offensive end in just a second. Wemby cannot guard Karl-Anthony Towns. When he did, it was easy buckets for Karl-Anthony Towns driving past Wemby. But Karl-Anthony Towns can guard Wemby. Karl-Anthony Towns is just fine being out on the perimeter, guarding Wemby on the perimeter, going around screens, in that drop coverage. Wemby's not the guy that's going to pull up from three around the screen, right? He'll take an open three, but he's not going to pull up. Sometimes he will off the dribble, but you don't see many where he's coming around screens and using the screen to get himself open and take threes, right? He's not running around like that. So Karl-Anthony Towns was just fine being in drop coverage, guarding Victor Wembanyama. Similarly, in the paint, Wemby couldn't get any easy lobs to go. Wemby was out of sorts in this game, shooting, if I'm not mistaken, 6 of 21. He gets to 26 points because he has 12 of 13 free throws. But he just could not make a shot to help out the San Antonio Spurs. And the Spurs were going to win this game because Jalen Brunson was horrific in this game until the fourth quarter. It was just Karl-Anthony Towns for the Knicks going. The Spurs had Julian Champagnie off the bench. We'll get to him in just a second. He was terrific in this game. Dylan Harper, I went live for this game and I couldn't stop talking about how good Dylan Harper was in this game. How good Dylan Harper has been all postseason. A rookie coming in off the bench. I think he should start. But, the Spurs are not going to mess with their lineup. It's worked. And he's come in, and he's just been a menace. Attacking mismatches, off the dribble, offensive rebounds, making open threes. That's the hardest thing for a young rookie to do, in my opinion, is to make the open three with all that pressure on you. He's been terrific. But in the end, Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns were just a complete mismatch for Wemby and the Spurs. Now, listen, this is not a blowout by any means. It was one in crunch time. This game could have went easy way. There were a couple of sloppy turnovers from the Spurs that I think put this game out of reach, made it so it went from a winnable game from the Spurs to a game that the Spurs should have had and sort of threw away. Karl-Anthony Towns on the offensive end was the biggest factor in this game. And you can say what you want about Jalen Brunson being the best player on the Knicks. You can say what you want about Jalen Brunson being the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. The Knicks go as Karl-Anthony Towns goes because he's just that important on both ends of the floor. Jalen Brunson's going to get you his points most nights, right? He had not a great game tonight. We'll get to him in a second. But Karl-Anthony Towns, the ability to shoot threes and make Wemby come out onto the perimeter if they want to guard him, right? Wemby, picked and chose his moments to come out and guard Towns when he was on the perimeter. That freed up tons of space in the middle, not necessarily for the Knicks to drive in and score, because, the Spurs still had good rim protection and bodies in the paint in a Stephon Castle, in a Julian Champagnie when they were in the paint, right? They still had a guy parked in there, but it got rid of those defensive rebounds. It allows the Knicks to get second chance opportunities, and that made the difference in this game. Mitchell Robinson, all the talk about his broken hand, coming in and giving you a couple, he didn't play a lot, right? He only needed to play, if I'm not mistaken, 13 minutes, right? But that's all you needed because he was able to come in, give you 6 rebounds, give you a couple of lob dunks, get some fouls on Luke Cornett, right? He did enough in this game, right? You're not asking him to play 20 minutes a night. Karl-Anthony Towns did a good job of staying out of foul trouble. Wemby didn't do enough of a job of punishing him, right? The Knicks overall as a team, I think we're ready for the moment, despite the days off. And the Spurs ultimately, down the stretch of this game, sort of fumbled the win away, right? A couple of loose ball turnovers from De'Aaron Fox, a couple of turnovers from Stephon Castle. Wemby turns the ball over, running up the floor, right? So a game, a game that the Spurs should have had, but I think they blew it. That being said, Jalen Brunson in this game, horrific for 3.5 quarters. He finishes the game after his terrific fourth quarter and really crunch time in the fourth quarter with 30 points, yes. But, did he get 30 points? Yeah, 30 points, but 12 of 31 shooting, 2 of 9 from 3, has just 4 free throws. He was horrific in this game, but that doesn't matter. You put all of that behind you when you enter the fourth quarter, when you enter crunch time. It's a tie game. It's like 94-94, something like that. And the New York Knicks are able to just dominate the rest of the game. And it's Jalen Brunson just getting to where he wants, getting into the paint, scoring layups in transition. Those turnovers from the Spurs really did not help because it now allows Jalen Brunson to get to the rim without a contest from Victor Wembanyama. That's the difference in this game. If Wemby's there to protect the paint, you're relying on the Knicks to make some shots. And listen, the Knicks got a couple of shots late in this game from an OG Anunoby, from a Landry Shamet. He was able to make a couple shots, but nobody could make threes. This was not a game about shooting. The game, I came into this game saying, and came into the series, as lame as it is, saying that this was going to be a series about shooting because the defenses in the paint were going to be so good between the likes of a Victor Wembanyama, between the likes of a Karl-Anthony Towns. Luke Cornett is a serviceable, maybe even above average rim protector. So is Mitchell Robinson. These two teams have great paint defense. So it was going to be a game about, can you shoot threes? And ultimately, neither team shot well. Neither team made threes. So you got a rock fight, right? Barely breaking 100 for the Knicks. Under 50 at the half for the Knicks. But in the end, they are able to get Wemby out of the paint. Not because he was tired or anything like that, but because they were able to force the young guards and the guys that maybe don't have the experience in their first ever year, first or second years in the play or in the NBA, their first year ever in the playoffs, they're able to get some turnovers, some sloppy decisions from the San Antonio Spurs. Jalen Brunson getting out in transition, easy points. One more thing on Karl-Anthony Towns, and this, goes with Wemby as well. Wemby cannot guard Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns, I counted maybe 8 times, and I'm sure there were more, 4 in the first half, where he didn't make all of the shots, but he was easily able to just not even pick up the dribble, but stand there, do one pump fake, and drive right by Wemby. Now, Wemby blocked a couple shots early because he was able to recover. He's just that tall and that long. But from there on out, Karl-Anthony Towns had his way with Wemby on the offensive end, right? And Wemby wasn't tired or whatever like that. It didn't look like he was struggling. He just couldn't stay in front of him. Cat was able to just get to his spot, dunk the ball, layups, free points on the Knicks' end in a game that didn't have shooting for either team. Free points were hard to come by, and Wemby has to be better. And I expect him to be, because Wemby knows, and I'm sure he's saying it right now in the post-game comments as we're recording this, that I need to be better, that I need to show up for my team, because the Knicks, they can win without a Karl-Anthony Towns or Jalen Brunson. Maybe not both of them, but they can win without one of them because they have the other guy. The Spurs, they have a collection of guys, but they don't have a 1B guy. They have a bunch of young guards in a Dylan Harper and a Stephon Kessel. You can say what you want. Maybe they're not technically guards, but whatever. Role wing players. They have a bunch of those guys. They have a bunch of, veteran role players in Champagne and in Barnes that can come in for a little bit. And then they have De'Aaron Fox. But De'Aaron Fox is not your typical 2 guard either. He's more of that facilitator. He's not looking to score. Right? In this game, in a game where Wemby has just 26 points on 6 of 21 shooting, right? He was as horrific as he was. De'Aaron Fox just has 7 points, 3 of 13. De'Aaron Fox was terrible in this game. Just 5 assists to go along with that. Just not a terrible game to when your star is having a poor game. I guess the Spurs go as their star goes, because nobody else was able to show up for their team, right? But as I was saying for the Knicks, right, Jalen Brunson doesn't have it going, but Karl-Anthony Towns is there, and then Jalen Brunson finally, with as the game goes on, he gets into that rhythm, and down the stretch, getting those easy points in transition, sealed the deal. So what happens? The Knicks are now up 1-0. They stun the Spurs on the road. Game 2 is on Friday, and I don't know what the odds have changed since game, or I guess, now that the Knicks have won. But my guess is the Knicks are now favored. I think they have to be. It was already a close 50-50 coin flip in my opinion. I actually picked the Knicks, and I thought the Spurs were going to win tonight. But what I saw tonight was not just a fatigue or a rust, because both teams couldn't make shots. That part was pretty easy. Both teams, were not impacted by, one of those outside factors. But it came down to sloppy decisions from the Spurs and the Knicks just having 2 guys that can win you a game, whereas the Spurs just have one in Wemby. That's the difference, in my opinion, in this series. I'm going to pick the Knicks in 6 games. As much as it pains me to say that, as a Celtics fan, I really do not want to see the Knicks win. But I think that's just what it is right now. The Knicks just have too many guys that can hurt you off the dribble, can hurt you shooting a corner three. Now, the Spurs have that too. Now, Wemby might come out and have a terrific game all tied up, and, we head to New York split. But in my opinion, I think ultimately Jalen Brunson's going to have another great game. Karl-Anthony Towns, as long as he can play like that, he's going to be the series MVP. He was fantastic in this game on both ends of the floor. And listen, Jalen Brunson had a injury scare in the second quarter. It looked like he had like a high ankle sprain, rolled his ankle or something like that. It looked like he was going to go out. He went to the locker room for a bit with a knee injury as well. He got banged up. So we'll see what happens there. There's only 1 day off. There'll be a couple days where there's 2 days off between the city switches, right? So that's going to play a factor. Their injuries. Wemby looked a little hobbled in the second half. It looked like he rolled his ankle or something like that. So injuries can always play a factor. But assuming everybody's healthy, I think the Knicks are going to be able to get it done. I really do. Now, there's a couple other things in this game that I think were interesting. The Knicks in the first half left Julian Champagnie open for pretty much the entire half. And Julian Champagnie made them pay, right? I forget what he had in the first half, but he finishes the game 5 of 10 from 3. I think he was like 5 of 8 in the first half, something like that. Goes 0 of 2 in the second half. But he could not miss in that first half, and they kept leaving him open. They kept leaving him to just shoot the threes, and he made them every single time. He was the only guy for the Spurs that could make a shot. And it would be nice to see him show up a little bit more in the second half, but the Knicks changed their scheme in the second half. They changed the way that they guarded him. They stopped, leaving him open. They started putting a guy on him and leaving a guy on him, right? And that made the difference in this game because the Spurs weren't getting those easy looks from a Julian Champagnie anymore. They weren't getting, production from a guy that was the only guy making shots, right? So the Knicks changed their game plan, and I really thought that, the Spurs, it wasn't like any team really had to change their game plan. Nobody could make shots. Nobody could, do anything. It wasn't like it was a great game to watch aesthetically, right? It was very much a rock fight. So it wasn't like the Spurs had to change shots. The Knicks couldn't make shots. The Spurs were fine with the way they were playing defense. Nothing was, people were getting open shots, right? It wasn't like there was no open shots to come by. People were getting open threes. They just couldn't knock them down. So it's hard to know what you have to change in those situations. But in the end, as I've said, right, it just came down to the execution in crunch time and the veteran experience and the, second team All-NBA point guard was able to get out of his slump and get it done for the Knicks, while the Spurs and their inexperience and De'Aaron Fox turning the ball over, they can be a little turnover prone. They have been in the past. That was one of my keys to this series. You can go check out that podcast where I preview the entire series and give my prediction. Ultimately, it was the case. Now, everything can change in Game 2. We'll see. But right now, the Knicks have the upper hand, and it's pretty simple to me. They have 2 guys that can beat you. The Spurs have 1. I'm going to wrap it up right there. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back live after Game 2 of the NBA Finals on Friday. We're not going to go live for the game like we did today, but we'll be live after the game, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we'll have content out on social media. We'll probably have a podcast episode on Friday morning previewing Game 2 as well, so tune in for that. And until next time, I guess I have to say go Spurs, but the Knicks right now look like they have the upper hand.